Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Red Lettuce. I am here with Alex Rubinstein. He is an independent reporter. You can find his work at his Substack at realalexruby.substack.com. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm happy to be on the show.
Well, I wanted to have you on to talk about your latest article, which is on the gray zone. It's called How Ukraine's Jewish President Zelensky Made Peace with Neo-Nazi paramilitaries on the front lines of war with Russia. In your article, you expose the PR job mainstream media has been doing by trying to use his Jewish identity. You point out throughout 2019 that Zelensky and his administration deepened their ties with ultra-nationalist elements across Ukraine. But Western corporate news seems to omit this in their coverage. Why would that be? And could you talk about who these groups are?
Yeah, so actually I saw a tweet that kind of summarized it pretty well, identifying 6 groups in particular that have connections to the state and neo-Nazi ideology. Really, the thing about Ukraine is, like, if you hear the term nationalist or ultra-nationalist, you can nitpick, but it really means Nazi. These people get their ideology from Stepan Bandera's Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which was a Nazi collaborating organization that is responsible for the massacre of more than 100,000 people, including the murder of 33,000 Jews in the course of 2 days. So I talk about a handful of groups in my article. I mentioned ADAR, which is like a neo-Nazi battalion, but I really hone in on 3 of them, and that would be Right Sector, the Azov Battalion, and C-14, which was started as the youth wing of the Svoboda Party, which, there's pictures of Joe Biden and John McCain meeting with the founder of Svoboda and shaking his hand, him, of course, being easily identified as a Nazi because of the photos of him doing the Sighal. Was also co-founded by Andrei Perubi, who, another neo-Nazi guy who led the Ukrainian parliament for a number of years and has been given a warm welcome in Washington by Biden's foreign policy guy, Michael Carpenter, and Marco Rubio. So there's, that shows kind of the bipartisan support for this. But I talk a lot about Azov and C-14 in particular because Right Sector split in 2015. So it's still a really important organization because a number of them were incorporated into the Ukrainian military, just like Azov was incorporated to the Ukrainian military. But the longtime leader of the organization, I have photos of him meeting with the head of the Ukrainian military and announcing that he'd been made an official advisor. These, again, neo-Nazis that have carried out massacres, carried out pogroms. One figure I focus on in particular is a man by the name of Yevhen Kadas. This guy, he is the leader of C-14. C-14 is an organization which has carried out on film pogroms against Romani people, taking axes to their camps and setting them ablaze, all on video. And they have an agreement with the Kiev municipal government, as well as other local governments, to act as a street force against any kind of unrest, or they take it as free reign to do pogroms against Romani and violently attack any kind of LGBT or feminist or left wing more generally, any kind of protest of that nature. So what I do is I kind of, in my article, I focused on Zelensky, who was elected on a platform of peace with Russia, and the means of peace was to be what they call the Steinmeier formula. And you can interrupt me if I'm getting ahead of our conversation here. But this was what Zelensky was elected on, and I'll say that the coalition of basically neo-Nazis in Ukraine, the electoral coalition that ran against Zelensky in the presidential elections, failed miserably. They got like 2.15% of the vote. So it shows you that the people of Ukraine are not overwhelmingly in support by any means of neo-Nazism. In fact, the line of the Kremlin, Putin himself has said that the people of Ukraine have been taken hostage by these neo-Nazis. And again, nobody's saying that Zelensky himself is a neo-Nazi. But what I show in my article is that Zelensky has basically lost control to them. He had an agenda, they thwarted it, and they've gotten what they want, which is a full-scale war against Russia. And I show all this with direct quotes from the neo-Nazis, with photographic and video evidence of how they were able to basically steer the policy of the federal government, of the central state.
Yeah, and we keep on hearing that all this is omitted in the mainstream coverage of what's been going on in Ukraine. And they try to use Zelenskys identity to deny the fact that he is aligned with neo-Nazis. Why do you think that is? Because we come from Jewish backgrounds, and we when we bring this up to people, around us, they say, well, how could he? He's Jewish, so
right.
Why would he be? How could he align with Nazis? And well, we kind of know from history that your identity doesn't automatically stop you from aligning with Nazis. So
yeah,
why is the media not talking about that? Like, why are they trying to do? Why are they doing this PR job?
I asked the same question. How could he?
Yeah.
Because it's really sick. He's not only a traitor to Jews, in my view, but also a traitor to his own people, because he's leading them into a suicide pact. Ukraine is a country of 10 million, roughly. Russia is 110 million. It's a superpower armed with nuclear weapons. So there's no way that the people of Ukraine are going to do well in this scenario. And that's why I think Zelensky is like, the most disgusting human being, these days. The mainstream media is doing this. Look, if you look at the BBC, if you look at The Guardian, if you look at Bellingcat, which is funded by the United States government, if you look at Chromdask, which is a Ukrainian-based outlet funded by Piero Midyar, George Soros, and the United States Agency for International Development, Vice News, funded by Saudi Arabia, all these outlets have actually a strong track record of their reporting on neo-Nazi forces in Ukraine. If you just go back a few years, you can find these investigative reports, video reports, exposing this massive problem in the country's political sphere and military sphere. Now they're either silent on the issue of the Nazification of the country, or two, trying to diminish it and memory hole their own reporting. U.S. media is doing this because it's like an easy talking point, right? And there's actually a compilation that I put together for my article, although it came out quite a few days earlier than my piece, of the mainstream media deploying this talking point. And you have, for example, Alexander Vindman, who was the so-called Ukraine whistleblower, whose mission was to ensure that U.S. lethal weapons make it in the hands of Ukrainian paramilitaries like the Azov Battalion. Him saying that the Nazi or fascist issue in Ukraine is non-existent, that the Jewish people are welcomed and central to the culture of Ukraine, and that it's just all fake, basically. Of course, this isn't true, but the mainstream media is doing it because it's like it's a super easy talking point, but it's a straw man because nobody's saying that Zelensky himself is Jewish. In fact, I tweeted an interview with guy by the name of Sergei Markov, who was a former MP with Putin's United Russia Party, and he says, "I know that I'm not saying Zelensky is Jewish. I'm sorry, I'm not saying he's a Nazi. He's Jewish, in fact. What I'm saying is that the government of Ukraine deploys these neo-Nazi forces to enact terror on those they disagree with, and that's precisely the point. It's a minority of ultra-violent fascists that have outsized influence in the country's political and military affairs. But the mainstream media, it's like, you can just say, oh, well, he's Jewish, so how can this be the case? I mean, it was guaranteed to be the case since 2014. Back before the coup in 2011, Viktor Yanukovych, the more pro-Russian president who was overthrown in the coup, he revoked the Hero of Ukraine award that was given under the prior pro-Western administration to Stepan Bandera, the Nazi collaborator and mass murderer. That, of course, was undone after his overthrow. And what we've seen in Ukraine since that time is, as the Forward put it, a renaming after Stepan Bandera every week. You have Babin Yar, which Zelensky himself falsely accused Russia of bombing. The main street that leads to Babin Yar, it's a very important avenue in the north of Kiev, was renamed Stepan Bandera Avenue. Again, this leads to the ravine where his forces carried out basically a genocide, 33,000 Jews in the course of 2 days. So, the mainstream media was quick to latch onto that and claim that Putin was disgracing Holocaust history, but in fact, it's the Kiev City Council which did that in 2019 or 2018, maybe. So again, they're deploying his Jewishness, which is something that he's downplayed in the past, as a means of deflecting and doing a straw man argument.
Right. And then I think it's really ironic and hypocritical, again, of mainstream media, because we also see Putin depicted as Hitler. They put like the Hitler stash on him. Yeah. Meanwhile, he's the one who's actually fighting the neo-Nazi forces, when Zelensky's the one who's been backing them up and aligning with.
Yeah. So I will say that Zelensky, given that his platform for a good portion of his administration was peace with Russia, he was not on the same side as neo-Nazis. For a long time, they were very opposed to him. They'd antagonize him and do everything they could to subvert him. It was only it was only after he realized that he couldn't beat them that he decided to join them, really. And that's kind of the history that I show in my article with Max Blumenthal, is how he was embarrassed by them on television, and since that time offered them seats at the table to discuss Ukraine-Russia relations, and really caved into their agenda.
Yeah, and I mean, this has also been revealed in the Pandora Papers regarding Zelensky, and how his top funder, who is an Israeli guy, his name is Igor Kolomoisky. Yeah, sorry, the name is kind of tricky.
You have no idea.
So, and he funds the Azov Battalion and the
and Idar. Yeah.
So,
and he was a top backer of Zelensky.
Right. It's just like, how that's not mentioned at all. Imagine if this guy was a backer of Putin, one of like Putin's one of the oligarchs or whatever. We would never hear the end of that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and speaking of difficult names and the Hero of Ukraine award, the guy that this is like the highest honor in Ukraine. I was talking about it because it was given to Stepan Bandera, but the guy that Zelensky gave the Hero of Ukraine award, Dmytro, well, it's Kotsiubalo or something like that. This guy from Right Sector, which is again a neo-Nazi organization. I mean, just the idea of a Jewish president giving the highest honor of the state to a neo-Nazi who, by the way, brags he keeps a wolf, a pet wolf in a cage near his fighters, and he brags to reporters that he feeds the bones of Russian children to it. So this is absolutely sick. At every turn, Zelensky has defended people who have espoused neo-Nazism. He has collaborated with them. Yevhen Karas, the leader of C14, a couple videos I highlighted in my article of him. One is, or of his group. One, the first being the C14 group of them carrying out a pogrom against Romanis. Two, of him talking just before the outbreak of the full-scale war on February 5th about how neo-Nazis played a pivotal role in the Maidan coup, and how if it weren't for neo-Nazis, the Maidan coup would have been a gay parade. Those are his words. Yeah. And how that 8% was, which was neo-Nazi, was the deciding factor. This is a guy who's like not only anti-Jewish, but super anti-gay. Footage of him since the conflict really ramped up, where he declares it a holy war, and says that if it being a holy war, if they die, it's okay. He spends the majority of the video, which he shoots of himself in a vehicle transporting fighters to go fight Russia. He's talking about how to identify Russians, how to identify Russian tanks versus Ukrainian tanks, that sort of thing. But one thing he says is like, you can tell who's a Russian because they're gay. So it's just filled with homophobic slurs. And I mean, look at these fucking Russian dudes, man. I don't know if that's the insult I'd go for.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. It's just that the hypocrisy just never stops, because it's, Putin's supposed to be, he's labeled as this like, far right autocrat who hates like, gay people, but then there's no discussion about who like Zelensky is aligning with.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think Nazis really like gay people or anyone, that's
I mean, the original Nazis targeted gay people and put them in the gas chambers, right. So it's really it's really hypocritical. And Azov Battalion in Mariupol, which is getting a lot of headlines lately. Azov Battalion has been had de facto control over the city since 2014, when they took the airport from Russian separatists. They've attacked gay parades. They've attacked feminists and any kind of left-wing organizing. And this has really been the case throughout Ukraine, not just in Mariupol, but the whole country. Organizations like C14 and Azov and Right Sector have carried out campaigns of terror on any kind of left-wing movement.
Yeah, and not only that, you also point out in your article that Zelensky has authorized the release of hardcore criminals to join the battle against Russia. He's also ordered all males of fighting age to remain in the country. And Azov militants have been enforcing this policy by brutalizing people attempting to leave. Just imagine if Putin was doing this. It would be in the headlines nonstop. So again, the mainstream media ignores this. Why do you think?
Well, I mean, it's wartime, right? So of course there's got to be a total omission of any countervailing facts, right? I mean, it's just part of the propaganda campaign. And I'm gonna say, Ukraine is winning this propaganda campaign. Uh, all the messaging that we've gotten for the past years about how influential Russian trolls are in American politics. I mean, that's out the window.
I mean, this just speaks to how the U.S. we're the most like propagandized like nation on earth.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted a poll a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, that was conducted, between February and early March, late February and early March, which showed that more than half, I think it's 58%, think that Russia is either socialist or communist.
Oh my God.
So more than half of the American public thinks that, and it's just totally absurd. But one thing I'll note about that poll is that another question that it asked respondents was do you think that the United States should stay out of like world affairs, right? And what it showed was that Black people and white people that have no college education were far more likely to support U.S. disengagement from global affairs than the college educated white people. So I think, look, and that's it's the people with no college degree that would have to go over and fight Russia,
Right.
So it speaks to that, and it also speaks to, in my view, the universities just being indoctrination centers for the global elite and their ideologies.
I agree. That is very telling right there, just with those statistics.
Oh, and you were talking about Mariupol, and I'm sorry, the demand that men of fighting age engage in the war.
Yeah.
And I highlighted a few videos in my article that show the extreme violence that Azov is willing to enact, or appear to show, I should say. I obviously I don't have the resources to verify it, but it certainly seems like it's the case that these videos show Azov fighters pulling families out of their car at gunpoint violently and throwing them around. Another video, which was incredibly disturbing to watch, shows a man and a woman attempting to leave, and there's like bodies strewn throughout the street on top of snow, dead bodies that were shot by Azov. Then Azov starts shooting and kills the wife of the guy filming. Really disturbing stuff. But the point of this is not just because, ultra violence, right? It's because they want to use the civilian population as human shields.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is, I've seen a number of videos of Azov operating from inside of schools. So they're using this civilian infrastructure to try to frame Russia for some kind of humanitarian disaster or some kind of crime against humanity. One thing I pointed to in my article was a Telegram post from the National Corps, which is it's the political party of the Azov Battalion, led by the same guy, Andrei Belitsky, who has declared his goal is to lead the white races in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. So National Corp on their Telegram channel said that they would be overtaking the administrative building in the city of Kharkiv. And just one day later, after the time that they said that they would overtake it, there's footage of it being hit with a Russian airstrike. So Russia's goal here has been to, I mean, Putin really said it best, that it would be to demilitarize and denazify the country. They are taking a lot of precaution to only hit military targets. This is why if you turn on CNN, they're not showing footage of like war crimes, apart from, the occasional captured Nazi. I saw one video which is a war crime. You're not supposed to take video of prisoners of war, but I saw one where, the guy had a giant swastika tattoo. So this is the kind of thing that they're doing. And the Ukrainian side is doing that specific war crime much more frequently. But if you turn on CNN, you're not going to see the kind of devastation that we're being told with words is occurring. There's no video evidence because it's not happening. But I do want to point out that Kharkiv and Mariupol, where Azov has its headquarters, and Kharkiv, where they were founded and started, these are to the north and south of the Donbass. So it has been, for the past 8 years, these neo-Nazi forces that were on the front lines of the war against Donbass, and have carried out terror against them, and led to the deaths of something like 13,000 people.
Yeah, and just what's going on lately is also these neo-Nazi forces are stopping people from taking Russian aid, which is not talked about in the mainstream media at all either. We don't hear about how Russia is actually sending humanitarian aid to the people in Ukraine, and these Nazis are trying to stop people and threatening them with like murder if they take the aid. They're saying they're going to remember them and hunt them down later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is like what we saw in Syria a lot too, when the government would send aid to rebel-held areas, the rebels would take all that aid for themselves and sell it back to the community at extorted prices. So, I mean, and really that's what we have to prepare for here, is a Syria-like scenario, because this is what Hillary Clinton and Blinken and Joe Biden have hinted at, is that they want to use, Hillary Clinton said it herself, that she wants to use the Afghanistan model, which was Operation Cyclone, arming the Mujahideen with billions of dollars in weapons, training them, using people like Osama bin Laden as assets to trap Russia into a quagmire that is inescapable and drain it of its resources. So that, the model of arming these jihadists in Afghanistan is exactly what the US did in Syria, and it's exactly what they're trying to do in Ukraine, except rather than it being jihadists, it's neo-Nazis.
It's the Brzezinski method, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Another thing that Fox, my co-host Fox found recently, or I think it was today or yesterday, that the NED on their page, they took down all the money that they spent in Ukraine. I find that to be very interesting, and instead they replace it with a support page for Ukraine.
I mean, what's happening now, and again, not to draw parallels to Syria too much, but and the NED leader, he got on stage at a DC rally recently and said Slava Ukraine, which is a glory to Ukraine. It's a term that was popularized during the era of Nazi collaboration. But what's happening, the Ukrainian government has a website that they set up to recruit foreign fighters. So what happened in Syria, organized by the CIA, these rat lines of foreign fighters to carry out a proxy war against the government and Russia, is they're again trying to do it, but they're doing it more openly. They don't have to hide it because it's not Al-Qaeda, and like most Americans are like, oh, Al-Qaeda, I don't like those guys, I'm not supporting this, whereas the U.S. doesn't have that history of losing 3,000 people in a terrorist attack to these neo-Nazis. So they can just say the president's Jewish and then do all the recruiting for these fascist militias out in the open.
This is the result of brain rot from identity reductionism that we see.
Yeah, and 3+ years of priming from Russiagate, you know.
Right.
Putin is the big bad of the world.
Yeah, it's the big bad. Yeah, for real. It's crazy, and it just shows how like ahistorical people are here. They have no idea of like the anti-fascist history of Russia and how they've, you know, historically been against fascism and fought against it. Without them, we would not. It would be a totally different story. It'd be a totally different story without the Soviets. But what I have, my final question I have for you. So with NATO expanding toward Russia and Western-backed neo-Nazi forces committing acts of terror in Ukraine for nearly a decade, people still criticize Putin's actions in recent weeks. What's your response to those that think Putin's actions are wrong?
Well, I mean, I think that there have been a lot of people that make the argument that Putin is violating international law. Even those who have been critical of the Nazi situation in Ukraine have made that claim that he's violating international law. I would say international law doesn't matter anymore. I mean, after Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, especially. I mean, who's going to talk about international law in the context of NATO?
Exactly.
It's disgusting to even bring that up, in my view. And there are good-meaning people doing that. But I really think that it's gone on for 8 years now, and Putin's hand was forced. What was he going to do? And again, you know, he's not. Maybe invading Ukraine is against international law, but one, what does it matter? And two, he's not like indiscriminately bombing civilians. Like Putin doesn't want a population on his doorstep that hates him for war crimes, right?
Right.
So it's really it's been very precise, the campaign that Russia has engaged in. And I would say rather than condemn Putin for invading Ukraine, condemn NATO for violating over and over again the agreement not to expand east, condemn the Ukrainian government for violating the Minsk Accords time and time again over the past 8 years by bombing its own people, and you know, condemn the U.S. government and the EU and for imposing what is in effect a genocidal policy of economic warfare against the Russian people, which has devalued the currency by 30%, and will inevitably lead to starvation and excess death. And not only that, but you know, I just want to say as a final note that this policy of economic warfare is going to backfire. It's going to be seen as a major milestone in the history of the downfall of the United States empire. I mean, you have the mass boycott of the Russian market. Well, that's going to hurt Russia in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to increase the power of Russian companies and Chinese companies. It's going to strengthen the Russia-China alliance, and it's going to deprive Western corporations of money from that market. Not only that, but it's going to cause a lot of resentment in Europe, where you know, Europe gets a lot of their goods from China. Shipping rates from China by air have skyrocketed 80%. So the price of many goods are going up by nearly double. And this is going to cause a lot of resentment. You know, the aim of these kinds of sanctions has always been to stir up popular resentment, so people try to overthrow the government. Well, I think that might backfire in Europe, where people are really fed up with the cost of living, the rising oil prices, and the prices of goods.
It's going to happen here too. I mean, and instead of sending all these billions of dollars to fund neo-Nazis, maybe we should spend that money here in America, where we're also being crushed with rising gas prices and food prices. People can't afford to.
The highest inflation in like 40 years.
Yeah,
before all this,
exactly. So this is all going to backfire, especially in the imperial core here in America. I think it's only going to awaken. Hopefully, it's going to awaken people's consciousness even more.
We'll see.
We'll see. We hope. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you joining us, or me rather, right now. But before we sign off, let people know where they can find your work.
Yeah, well, I would say first of all, more importantly than my work itself, check out the story on the Gray Zone. It demolishes the PR campaign that the mainstream media has been conducting on Zelensky. Share it around. I mean, not just for my benefit, but just like for a little bit of sanity in the narrative. Share it with your family and friends if you do so dare. But you can find my work on, well, I tweet a lot, and a lot of the stuff that I've been tweeting about Ukraine didn't even make it into the article. So I follow me on Twitter. It's at Real Alex Ruby. That's RUBI. My Substack is substack.com/realalexruby. If I I don't put anything on a paywall on Substack, but if I have an article that's published elsewhere, I tend to just post a preview with a link to the full article. So Substack is a really good way to support me if you can financially, but also for free, stay on top of everything that I'm publishing. And that's really it. Just be loud, guys. This is not what the American people want or deserve. It's not what the Ukrainian or European or the Russian people want or deserve. So let's stamp out this phony narrative.
Absolutely. We're totally with you on that. Thank you, Alex. We look forward to having you on again soon.
I can't wait. Thanks.
Bye.